TellyCast, the TV industry news review.
Hi, I'm Justin Crosby, and welcome to this week's TellyCast. We still have some sponsorship slots available for our special MIPCOM Online Plus shows, running 9th, 12th, 13th and 14th of October, for distributors to promote and discuss their content slates. If you're interested in booking a slot, email me on justin@boomdialogue.com for the rate card and for more info. You can also find that email address in this week's episode description. On this week's show, my guests are two leading indie producers operating on different sides of the pond. Phil Fairclough, Managing Director of Two Wise Monkeys Entertainment, and Ian Lamarra, Co-founder and Creative Director of Alaska. Peter White from Deadline joins us from Hollywood with all the post-Emmy news. And K7 Media's content crystal gazer, Girts Licis, looks at the world of IP and where tomorrow's TV drama stories are coming from. And as a clue, it's not just book adaptations. It's all coming up on this week's TellyCast. This week, I'm delighted to welcome two independent producers with a vast range of experience between them. Phil Fairclough has worked as series producer-director at the BBC's Natural History Unit, created ITV's wildlife production group Granada Wild, was SVP of Development and Production at Discovery Channel USA, EVP Development and Production at Creative Differences and Natural History Network, and launched the US arm of Earth Touch, and now runs his own production company, Two Wise Monkeys Entertainment. Phil has been responsible for productions including Werner Herzog's Cave of Forgotten Dreams and $10 million co-production Big Pacific, plus a wide range of shows for Nat Geo Channel, Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, and broadcasters around the world. And joining Phil is Ian Lamarra, co-founder and creative director of London-based indie production business Alaska. Ian started his career in his native Glasgow, working in development for Mentorn, the BBC, and heading development for STV, before moving south to London to work for Tiger Aspect's factual division and then becoming IWC's head of global formats. He co-founded Alaska in 2011 and serves as creative director. Alaska is known for series such as Damian Lewis Spy Wars, Julie Walters' Coastal Railways, and the forthcoming Amelia Fox-fronted true crime series In the Footsteps of Killers. Ian has also worked with the Edinburgh TV Festival for the past 6 years, having served as head of talent there and booking the likes of Louis Theroux, Russell Brand, Hugh Laurie, Sharon Horgan, and Amelia Clark for the event. So, welcome to the show, Phil and Ian. How are you doing, guys?
Great, thank you.
I'm good, Justin. What episode of the show is this? Is it 29, 28?
This is 23.
23, that's amazing. You're one of the few people in lockdown who said they were going to do something and did it. And, you know, like everybody I know, including me, was like trying to learn our language or like take up the saxophone. You started a podcast and it's still going, so well done.
It is. Thank you. And if COVID and lockdown and everything else is anything to go by, well, I'll still be doing it in about 5 years. But
absolutely, I think this week, the lockdown is going to happen again in the UK. Anyway, I don't know about America, Phil, but I think you're going to have 23 more episodes for sure.
It's all very patchy here. I'm in Miami, and I haven't really been out of the house for 6 months, except to the chiropractor, and once for my birthday. But as you probably know, Miami had the distinction of being, or South Florida, the distinction of being not only America's hotspot for COVID, but we're all heading to a different kind of winter. There won't be much of a Halloween. There won't be much of a Christmas, except what you can throw together. Anyway, it does give us the chance to be creative and talk to other people.
Brilliant to have you both on the show. Phil, as you said, you from Miami and Ian from London. So Phil, if we start with you. So you've been working on natural history shows and specialist factual shows for pretty much all of your career. Can you give us an idea of how things are in that sector right now?
Yeah, I'll try. It's not all I've worked on for all of my career, just to be clear. I actually started out as a news journalist, reporter, producer. Then after going out to Iraq for the first Gulf War, or just after the first Gulf War, decided that I needed to do something different and ended up working in kids' TV for the BBC Natural History Unit.
That's a bit of a leap.
Yeah. Well, I decided that not actually that I was scared of being shot at, which, yes, of course I am, but that trying to do news, tell the story of complex global events in like a minute and a quarter in an emerging era of kind of look at me TV, here I am ducking bullets flying, was probably not the best way to tell complicated and interesting stories. So I tried to, find another thing that I could do after having probably spent, 8-9 years in news and remembered my degree in zoology from Bristol and decided that that probably had some future. And I took a job as a director on the Really Wild Show, which I ended up running the kids bit of the BBC's Natural History Unit before heading out to America. But yeah, I've done a lot of this. I suspect it's the same story as practically every other sector of TV. I mean, except that, oddly, there are some advantages for sending, how should we put this, socially challenged people who like to be on their own in remote places for long periods of time to distant shores. And, it's a good time to have people who don't really want to be around people go and film in inhospitable places. So with that said, I actually have a series that's just starting on the Great Lakes. It's a 3-part big natural history series, which is somewhat challenging because it as much as I feel like it's totally safe and comfortable to send cameraman X to go and sit in a blind and film wolverines, we have to also navigate the safety of that with our networks. This is being done for 3 networks, one in America, one in Canada, one in Austria and Germany. And they all have...
Can you tell us who they are?
I can tell you about the Canadian one, TV Ontario, who are a small network in Ontario, Canada, with the punches above their weight, in the sense that they have big ideas, big ambitions, and they can bring quite a lot of money to a production if they choose to. And we're very fortunate that they chose to. I'm filming right now a series in the Great Lakes, which is the place that everybody's heard of, Lake Michigan, Lake Ontario, Lake Superior. And they are straddle the border of Canada and the US, which is quite convenient from a co-production perspective. It's a little inconvenient in terms of trying to move people across borders, which is something that we're all grappling with in production. But it's also good in the sense that it's a place where we can send people who like to be alone out into the wilderness to spend days and weeks in blinds filming obscure wildlife and portray this tremendous unknown freshwater ocean and bring it to screens around the world. It's quite a high budget. It's about $1 million an hour. So, if people had told me at the beginning of COVID that you could get these projects going, I might have said, what are you snorting? But we've been able to do it. And, one of the things that plays to everyone's advantage, of course, is if you can generate content at the moment, there's a big hungry market for it. And that's been helpful.
Absolutely. Your sense is that natural history production essentially is to a certain degree still operating, because I had the assumption that the vast majority of it wasn't. But I suppose on a limited level, if the planes are going to a certain location and people can get there with a simple camera rig, a lot of that is still happening, presumably.
It is. I mean, Bristol, which you I'm sure know in the UK is dubbed the Hollywood of natural history, is booming. It's obviously challenging, but one of the things it's forcing people to do is say, hey, well, look, maybe there are local people who can go and film that sequence that I need on great white sharks or wolverines or whatever it is, wherever it is. And I think actually that this will be beneficial to an industry that has also typically sort of had a slightly imperialistic view of the world and said, we'll send in our cavalry because we know best. If you can't send people to the Congo, but you have to get a sequence in the Congo, then you're going to have to find someone in the Congo to go and do it, or someone in a neighboring country to go and do it. So there are lots of workarounds going on, and I think, work is proceeding. It's a bit more bureaucratic. You have to tick some more health and safety boxes. Outfits like Viacom, which now sit over, say, Smithsonian Channel, are very nervous because, everyone's got big legal liabilities potentially. So we're all having to jump through a few more hoops. Having said it, I'm currently figuring out how to send Cher, I'm sure you've heard of her, I Got You Baby, to Pakistan to rescue an elephant and fly with it to Cambodia.
Wow.
So I'm figuring if I can do that and convince some people that I can, and I think I have, then I'm not too troubled by this lockdown. I continue to do what I do, which is sort of have creative and financial tentacles all over the world.
Yeah. Well, that sounds fascinating. But, just going back to your point about local production when it comes to natural history and getting somebody in the Congo to film something, presumably that's going to be better from a cost perspective and also from a sustainability perspective, because natural history programming has traditionally been probably the one form of programming that's least green, if you like.
We'll come to that, and I totally and violently agree with it being the least green, and that's something we'll get to, not only in the way it's produced, but also in what is not said and what is not seen. That's something that's a bit of a bugbear for me, and I'm keen to get into it. But I do think this will make people do things differently. It is making people do things differently if we can encourage local production and discover people who have skills, whether they're in India or Pakistan or the Solomon Islands, and to some degree do some remote learning as well, because natural history filming is specialist. We do need to understand that. I understand it. There's a reason that the world flocks to Bristol to get a certain type of project, but it's not rocket science in the sense, it's about shooting things with the right equipment, with people who know how to get you close to animals. Of course, that's not all I do, but I do understand it. So I think actually this will result in spreading of skills, perhaps a greening of the industry, and maybe, just maybe, some more diversity that is forced to grow up rather quickly around the world. Because I bet you if you'd gone to someone in Bristol and said, hey, name me a filmmaker in the Congo, they wouldn't be able to. But now they perhaps can. I can.
Before we move on to Ian, just in terms of that Cher documentary project you were talking about, have you got a broadcaster attached on that at the moment?
I do. I have two broadcasters. It's a co-production. It's I can't really speak to either of them, but it is in production. And unless something very weird happens, I'm fairly confident. I don't want to talk too bad, put my mouth on it, as Hemingway would have said, but I feel pretty confident this is going to happen. And if you'd said I can fly an elephant and Cher from Pakistan to Cambodia at the beginning of lockdown, I'd have said, you really have been smoking something.
So, Ian, how have you been finding lockdown?
Well, I've been finding it okay. I really want to do a documentary about Phil sending an elephant and Cher to across the world to do a program. I could do a documentary about the making of that program.
Yeah, it's like Heart of Darkness or something.
Absolutely,
the real story. Yeah, that'd be good.
I'll pitch that in the UK.
Well, we can make that happen.
I think I'd like to see that. Somebody trying to get an elephant on an airplane. Is that possible?
It's a jumbo jet. Boom, boom.
Okay, I love it. It's like Dumbo. Yeah, the lockdown, to be honest, Justin, I mean, you kind of feel like you can't complain if you've managed to get some business and you've managed to keep your company afloat and you've managed to sort of keep in regular contact with commissioners and channels. It's not been ideal, obviously, but equally, I think, we can look at our sort of COVID part one and think that we are in an okay state coming out of it.
Yeah. You've had, what is it, 3 commissions of the last 6 months?
We've had 3 commissions in lockdown, one of which has been announced, which is Amelia Fox and Professor David Wilson, who's the UK's leading criminologist, are going to the sites of unsolved murders to walk in the footsteps of who they believe to be the killer and try to come to a conclusion of who they think was the culprit. And that's for Channel 4. It's been announced. And one of the biggest USPs about it is we're shooting it like a drama. It looks like a drama, but it's a factual program. So there's no voiceover. There's no pieces to camera. There's no, the usual tropes of a true crime program. It's sort of following them as they make this genuine journey and hope that it kind of combines the sort of thrill of what Amelia does, which is crime drama, like Silent Witness, and what David does, which is true crime.
Well, when they've done with that, can I have them come over here? Because I have a 6-part crime mystery investigation series, which is currently in production, both filming and editing, due to air shockingly soon. And so I could use some help.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we will all come over and help you out and solve some crimes like this sort of Scooby-Doo gang.
This is good. There's just a small commission in it for TellyCast, of course. For
finder's fee for TellyCast.
Exactly.
I think Justin gets 5% of all production budgets.
Sounds good. But that's really interesting because there is a trend, actually, that Girts has been highlighting over the last few weeks. Girts Licis, who's on the show every week, and he's been talking about the blurring of boundaries between factual and scripted. And we've seen a lot of this recently to varying degrees of success. But I suppose most famously things like Chernobyl and various projects around the Murdochs, etc. So it's really fascinating to see this sort of the lines between the two just getting less and less distinct.
That's been down to the way that the SVODs, and particularly Netflix, treat unscripted television. When they do unscripted, they do it like a movie. Things like Making a Murderer and The Staircase, and these are true crime documentaries, and they make them look like a movie. They make the poster look like a movie. They make the production look like a movie. And I think that people clearly are absolutely responding to that and sort of getting the sort of kicks you can get out of true crime, but with the production values and excitement, I suppose, of a sort of drama or a film. And I think the terrestrial channels in the UK are looking at that and thinking, how can we change the way we do our unscripted? And quite a lot of channels, are set in their ways, and they've got a certain way of doing things. And when we went through a lot of true crime programs that had been on terrestrial before, when we were making this program, we sort of wrote down the tropes that are this sort of you wheel out as a matter of fact. That kind of is talking head sitting there, with a black background, remembering something, and his voiceover telling you what you're already seeing. And we thought, we'll just take away all of that and sort of add a dramatic tension and style to what is a fascinating, genuine, current true crime journey. Even though the crimes are in the past, the investigation by David and Amelia is present tense, and so it feels more like watching True Detective than it does watching the sort of documentary you might see on a specialist crime channel. Yeah.
Well, it sounds fascinating. I can't wait to see it. And we've actually got a true crime special coming up on TellyCast in a couple of weeks. Make sure you tune in for that.
I'll send you a clip.
Yeah, do. It's we've got some fascinating guests on that as well.
Brilliant.
To be revealed soon. I also hear you've been branching into podcasts at Alaska.
Well, I've been kind of fascinated by that world for a long time for many reasons. I like the idea that you can sort of take, I speak to so many sort of on-screen talents who've got ideas for things that are passion pieces and that, they have all the contacts for, but, might not be able to be sold as a traditional sort of television program and go through that commissioning process and then take it upstairs and someone doesn't think it's quite right. All these people have these fantastic ideas. And so what we sort of decided to do was start a sort of podcast venture with Money Management, a talent agency in the UK. And, Francis, who runs that, and I have been building a slate of talent passion pieces, really, passion podcasts that we are currently sort of either recording or about to record. And it's a fantastic new world. And the best thing about it is, you can sort of bypass that commissioning process by just doing it. I've got an idea, let's do it. One of them, the talent had all the contacts for the guests, and we just did it, over the course of a few days. And now we've got a series in our locker, and we can take that to a platform where we can self-publish, and then suddenly it becomes a sort of, it becomes a thing, but it can also serve as a sort of pilot for an idea. The irony being that commissioners might come to us and say, I really like that, let's turn it into a TV show. And just to have that an outlet and a sort of system in place, really, to take all those passionate ideas from talent and make them happen in some form has been a sort of real joy, to be honest, rather than me sort of spending 6 months trying to sell them and then have to tell someone that nobody wants it. There's a reason for the commissioning processes, and there's a reason for the fact that you can't get everything away on sort of traditional television. But in the podcast world, if you want to go down the path of self-publishing, and everybody involved is prepared to do that, if the talent's prepared to say, okay, I'll do this, free, so we can have a thing that exists, and the producers are, and we're lucky enough to have a recording studio here in the office in Alaska, then why not just do everything? These are very, very established talents doing the thing they love the most, and you just think it's going to work. And there's no slots in the podcast world. You don't have a certain amount of hours that you have to commission. There's no barrier to entry whatsoever, and so it is a sort of exciting new venture for me anyway. I've never really done one before the lockdown, and as I say, at the very worst, you've got a thing that you loved putting together and enjoyed, and someone else really, really enjoyed. And at the very best, it can serve as a pilot that becomes a TV series.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're looking for TellyCast, the TV series.
Well, absolutely. I'm going to pitch that just after the behind the scenes of the elephant journey.
Perfect. This has been a very, very productive chat already, which is what we love. MIPCOM. Guys, yes. Phil, do you often travel to MIPCOM, or is that something that you tend to do less of as a producer?
I don't anymore. I used to when I was at the BBC, and it was, part of the annual pilgrimage you made to many places. It's still relevant, but it's less and less relevant to me as a producer, as in fact are many of the so-called can't miss events, I don't know if I'm going to bother going to real screen. Don't tell them. But, I think there's places that you need to show up to be seen. MIPCOM's nice, generally, because you can drink rosé and eat oysters and seafood on the seafront with the Croisette. But I'm not going to be there, but I haven't been there for a long time. If I was a distributor, I might be sweating this. But a lot of these kind of dinosaur events maybe having their last twitch of the tail.
Interesting. What about you, Ian? You're often to be seen down at MIPCOM and at MIPTV. How are you coping with the cycle being broken? There was nothing in April, and there's not going to be one in October. How's that going to affect you?
Well, I'm really, really sad because I was looking forward to getting some vitamin D from the sun on that beach as a sort of like post-lockdown treat. But I think you hit the nail on the head, Justin. I think for all of us, certainly, producers, broadcasters, you especially, Justin, as a publicist, you have a cycle. It's what you have. You have your calendar before you even start the year, and you're thinking real screen in January, MIPTV in April, even domestic ones like Creative Cities Convention just after that. Then Sheffield Doc Festival, then Edinburgh Festival, then MIPCOM, and then really Real Screen West in the middle. And you've got a calendar of events that you just sort of go to because you go to, and you haven't really questioned for years. And what COVID has done for so many parts of our industry, whether it's production or festivals, it stopped a cycle and it stopped habits, and it's a game changer. It's the ice age for this industry, and anyone coming out of it alive has had to adapt or die. And I think that I love MIPCOM, and for lots of reasons, and I think I'll always go to that. I'm European based, but I think people looking at their festival calendar are probably scoring at least 50% off of their budget from now, because they've lived without it, and they've had to find new ways to pitch to these international people or look at ideas from these international people. And when you've had to adapt, it's very sort of counterintuitive to go back just because you liked a couple of days in the sun.
Obviously, we need to point out that it's actually happening as a virtual event.
Yes.
This year, MIPCOM Online Plus. I imagine most of the key distributors around the world are going to be attending, and I'm sure there'll be lots of buyers as well. So I think it's going to be a very different type of market this time, and hopefully it's going to be a successful one as well. So
yeah, I think what's quite interesting is that it's about, I think, don't have the dates in front of me, it's about a month, even longer, as something that you can access if you buy a delegate pass. So if you were to buy, obviously, a delegate pass for MIPCOM, normally you get a 3-day event or a 4-day event, whereas I believe now it's from like October 5th until mid-November that you can access all that information. And that's incredible. I mean, that, you know as well as me, you come back after 4 days and you've retained no information. And so suddenly you've got this portal where you can watch, sessions, you can look back at conversations you've had with other delegates. And I think it'll be interesting, I guess, even for Read Mid-Em to look back and look at, the pros and the cons. It could be that a lot of good things come out of the lockdown version.
Exactly, and that's what we're talking about, isn't it? It's disruption, trying things,
Absolutely.
new things at this point, and creativity coming to the fore.
Yeah.
So we've reached that point in the show where we get to ask our guests about their stories of the week. What's caught their eye over the past 7 days within the TV industry? Phil, what's the story that stood out for you?
What stood out for me is the fact that RuPaul's Drag Race once again triumphed in the Emmys, both as an entertainment format and as the host. And this is a really interesting show, which has, I think, lots of lessons for broadcasters, producers. It's a great case study in how to do things right. I think it's also a great show. The only thing I don't like about it is that I'm not involved in it, but I know the producers, and I think what is great is you could say, looking at RuPaul's Drag Race, if you're not familiar with it, it's an African-American drag queen, and it celebrates drag queenery. And it's been running now, I think, for 9 seasons on Logo TV in America, which is a gay network, and it's now on VH1. But more than that, it's an absolute phenomenon. I challenge you to find someone who hasn't heard of it, who doesn't know who RuPaul is. And you could say, well, obviously, of course it's going to win a couple of Emmys this year, right? This year of all years, the year of diversity, the year of Black Lives Matter, that could be perceived as cynical. But actually, this is a great story of people taking risks, people campaigning, and doing things right in an industry that very often does things wrong and badly. And, I want to give credit to World of Wonder, the production company, Fenton Bailey, who's a Brit, who lives in LA, and Randy Barbato. This is their show. And I only am repeating their stories secondhand. But I was on a panel with Fenton who told me, this was a few years back, how hard it was to get this show going. No great surprise, right? And this was about 8 or 9 years ago. They had tried multiple times to pitch this show. They thought RuPaul was an amazing character, but they just couldn't find a buyer. Even Logo, I think. But they had a new head of development who sort of does what all new heads of development do. Come in, what you got lying around, what have you got that you tried, you love, that you haven't sold, and took it and sold it. But it's still, even then, not an easy show to buy. And most network execs want to have a safe bet. You know, they're basically insurance companies. You know, they have typically the longevity as a head of a network as maybe a Premier League football manager, right? You've got about one season and a bit in development. And if you haven't put points up after a year, 18 months, you're done. So it's an industry that's generally afflicted by short-termism. I hate to say it, and this is speaking more generally about US and perhaps pre-streamer, but it's afflicted by short-termism and the need to get quick hits, which forces people to do one thing. Let's have more and more of the same. We did that. It worked. Let's do more of it. Or let's have a spin-off that's derivative. And so RuPaul, to me, is a show that was a big risk. It was a show that the producers really had to work hard to get over the line. Even they'd kind of given up on it until someone else said, no, let's have another go. It's a show that probably didn't hit it out of the park, and I don't know the ratings, for the first 2 or 3 seasons. But then I'll tell you, from my experience at Discovery, Deadliest Catch didn't hit it out of the park to the degree that it does in the first season or 2. That had its own long-term development cycle. In fact, it began as a 7-minute segment in a show called Extreme Alaska. That's for you, Ian. But that's where it began. And the time that it takes to develop shows is usually, and successful shows, is usually longer than a network exec will give it, and will, in fact, him or herself last in that position.
Yeah.
So to me, RuPaul is a lot of great things. It's a great show. It's a show that, you know, showed a real risk-taking attitude. It's a show that is uplifting and joyful. It's an entertaining show that sheds light on real issues. It's not cynical. And now it's being rewarded by critics, by Emmys, and, you know, by becoming a huge phenomenon, and I hope a monster financial success for World of Wonder. That's my story of the week, because it's got so many lessons for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, congratulations to the guys of World of Wonder and RuPaul and everyone involved in that. That's it's a great story, very well deserved. Ian, how about your story of the week?
Well, there's been loads to choose from. This is one of the sort of, I think 2020 has just got that thing where every week about 40 things happen that are huge. And then by the time you kind of think about it, something else has happened. You know, like you said, MIPCOM being cancelled, and also the BBC cancelling their sort of upfronts, their showcase. That was taking place in February. Like, what do they know that we don't? They're cancelling something that's taken place in 6 months. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, by the way. But my story of the week, it kind of has to be sort of, from a UK point of view, certainly the fact that Charlotte Moore has decided to step upstairs, I suppose, and get into her new role, and leaves the controller of BBC One position vacant. I think, you know, in terms of a story, and certainly in the UK market, but I think worldwide, you know, that's the biggest gig in town. And the idea that we're going to get a new BBC One controller is exciting and interesting.
So Charlotte Moore now is responsible for commissioning across all BBC network TV channels and iPlayer, as well as multi-platform commissioning and production for all its children's and educational content. I mean, that's it's got to be the biggest job in TV, really.
I think so. I mean, certainly the biggest job in British television, and I think that you know, Charlotte's obviously a very honest and fair person who obviously decided that to do her new job properly, she might not have been doing the BBC One controller job properly, or wouldn't be able to, I guess, going forward, and so has decided to sort of start looking for a new controller, and you know, that's a huge thing for the UK industry, because as you know, Justin, it's not just one job. You know, one person moving to that job creates a sort of seismic change if they come from, for example, another broadcaster, or it's a new face. You know, these are big moments, and it's. You know, that's the channel with the biggest budgets. It's the channel with the biggest reach, and to have someone else at the helm is a big story.
Absolutely, and we'll be looking at the runners and riders, I'm sure, for that BBC One controller role in the coming weeks on TellyCast. So we'll keep our eyes peeled on that. And congratulations, obviously, to Charlotte Moore. Quite an achievement. So now it's the time in the show where every week our guests get to nominate their hero of the week and who or what they want to get in the bin. So, Ian, yes. I'm going to come to you first. What about your hero of the week? Who or what is that?
Well, my hero of the week this week is, and I never thought I'd say this in my professional career, my hero of the week is Ofcom, the Office of Communications. And I don't know if your international listeners know, we had an episode of Britain's Got Talent go out on last Saturday, and the dance troupe Diversity did a sort of choreographed dance that was in solidarity of the Black Lives Matter movement and the death of George Floyd. And a record number of people in the UK, 25,000 people, complained that it should not have been on ITV and it should not have been on primetime. And I must admit, with Ofcom, I almost was fearing or expecting a sort of get out statement that said, we have to take all our viewers equally and seriously, and we are going to investigate this further. And they didn't. They stood up completely with Diversity and with ITV and batted away all those comments. And I think that is a massive, massive story. What's
shocking is the number of complaints. Was this some sort of orchestrated far right?
No, not at all. That's the sad thing. If that was a sort of social media, let's all complain, here's the phone number, you could almost get it. But it's a sort of, I think, a sad indication of still some of the attitudes in this country. But what's a huge, huge step forward is a body like Ofcom, an impartial body, standing behind what happened.
Well, good for them, absolutely. Who or what do you want to get in the bin?
Well, I was going to sort of do a halfway house and suspend my get in the bin, sort of on the same themes that we've been talking about of diversity. Obviously this year, worldwide incidents have brought the sort of lack of diversity in television and many other places to the fore. And a lot of the festivals, the virtual festivals this year, I think have had channel controllers and indie bosses and distributors all coming out and saying they're going to make massive changes and do massive things and change their on and off screen policy. And I think that's amazing, but I want them to do something about it and actually put their money where their mouth is and do the things they need to do. What I'm going to do is save my get in the bin for any broadcaster or production company, including my own, who doesn't actually follow that up. Because, if you saw the McTaggart lecture at Edinburgh this year, and even as a person who I'm old enough to have been going to these things for a long time, I've seen this happen before where maybe 7 or 8 years ago, people on stages promising the world and nothing happens. And they get the column inches and they get the credit and nothing happens. And I think that, this time we've got to all actually make those changes, or, again, it's just an empty platitude. So anyone who doesn't follow up gets in the bin, and they've got 6 months to do so. And so at the moment, everybody, I guess, in this television community is in my bin purgatory until they prove their way out of it. And it's something that, my company's small, and we maybe only have a maximum 2, maybe 3 commissions at any one time. But, we've been sort of making sure we're trying to put things in place that doesn't let us be complacent. And we haven't done enough. And it's so easy not to. And so easy to blame so many things, budgets and time constraints, and and I think everyone should be putting their not even money effort where their mouth is to make sure that these changes happen.
Well, that's a challenge to the industry. Everybody's got 6 months to get out of Ian's bin.
Absolutely, out of my dungeon.
Yeah, there we are. Phil, how about you? Who's your hero of the week?
My hero is a producer-editor called Daniel Shearer, who works for the Cornell Bird Lab. Daniel is a really talented editor. In fact, the last thing he did with me was a show called Shark versus Predator about things that eat sharks. he deserves most of the credit for that show. This week, I should say, he relatively recently, moved to take a job at what would I suppose be the equivalent of the RSPB, but in America, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. I'm a bird lover. Growing up in London, if you're interested in animals, you've really only got a few choices and birds are it. But birds have had a huge role in my life. And Daniel did a short film for the Cornell Bird Lab, which really is powerful and moving and uses what I would say the dark powers of television and content for good, which is something I believe in doing. And it's about trying to persuade people at this time of year in America to turn their lights off at night, not for the obvious reason to save energy and, improve climate, but to help save birds. 1 billion birds have disappeared from America, and many of them just crash into buildings. So he's done this really beautiful little film about turning your lights off for the birds. Ian was talking about it with podcasts. Everyone can now make a difference with media in a way that was not always easy to do. The barrier to entry is so low, and there are so many talented people around who are making interesting, small, impactful, and sometimes big, impactful things on video, that this for me is not only a heroic little endeavor, but it speaks to a democratization of our business. And that's why he's my hero.
Is it possible to see this online? Is there a link that we can post in the description?
There most certainly is. I can't reel it off right now, but I will send it to you. It's called Lights Out Fall 2020.
That sounds amazing. And also, Phil, before we go any further, there are things that eat sharks.
Yes. Lots of things that eat sharks of all sizes, and other sharks eat sharks. Octopuses eat sharks. Whales eat sharks. Even birds eat sharks.
Birds eat sharks. I'm definitely pitching that. The birds eat sharks.
No, that's my show.
That's incredible. It's something that we've been looking at, and something that was a big part of the sort of Edinburgh Festival again this year, is that anyone now can make content. It doesn't even require that much money or any money. Everyone's got a phone. Everyone's got YouTube. Not everyone, obviously, but I think this is a massive moment in our industry, that everyone's out there. TikTok, YouTube, self-publishing, podcasting is fantastic to see and fantastic to be part of.
And a little scary for us.
I love it. I think it's brilliant because, I think we're kind of lucky in the sense that, certainly in my experience, the people who are making fantastic self-published content still, for whatever reason, want to work with professional, television program makers, and also want to be on these traditional platforms. I know some pretty massive Instagram stars and TikTok stars, YouTube stars, who they love the idea of being on that sort of box in the corner of a room. And I think it's about our industry embracing theirs and kind of encouraging it and making sure we're across it and helping these people get even bigger platforms, or certainly wider platforms.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Coming back to what you were saying, is the democratization of the industry, isn't it? And it's actually, you don't need to go to a particular school now. You can actually just show an amazing video that you've created on your iPhone, and then it's like, that's pure talent that can be heard and seen.
Yeah. People come to me and say, how do I get into do this? And I say, just go and do it, because you can, because you have an iPhone or whatever the other, the Samsung Galaxy, whatever. You don't even need a good iPhone. You can go and make amazing content and edit it and broadcast it on your phone. That is an amazing opportunity. When I say it's a little scary, I mean, it's a little scary if you're trying to make a living, trying to convince people to spend 2, 3, 500,000, $1 million an hour to compete with that. If you're smart, and I think Ian and I are both leaning into this, it's a real opportunity to find talent and develop talent.
Absolutely. I think it's a gift in that sense. You know, like TikTok is incredible. TikTok, so when it was kind of Instagrammers and Twitter people, it's Instagram especially, you know, you weren't having to do a lot for your sort of likes. You just had to sort of be in a bikini or whatever, doing sit-ups. And TikTok is like this, the most creative and brilliant ideas are getting put out there, and all sorts of like chefs and natural history people and comedians making videos with like makeup and edits and scripting and lighting in their bedroom. And it's a godsend to anyone who kind of keeps an eye on that, because you're just seeing this sort of constant stream of new talent. And you can obviously tell quite overtly when they connect with an audience.
Yeah. My prediction is that 10, 20 years' time, all of these amazing content makers are going to be front and center of our industry. They're going to change TV to be some sort of hybrid. Everything's going to change. Schedules, formats of programming.
Yeah.
So many different things are going to change, because at the end of the day, you know, young people in the main are not watching linear TV, as we know.
You know, I think we've got a small window of opportunity where we can still get those people to kind of come and engage with television. But I think the next generation, you know, even the people I talk to can't understand that if I've got a good idea that I'm really passionate about, I have to take it to this person, and that person takes it to the next person, and that person takes it to the big person, and the big person says no, and that's taken 6 months, and your idea is gone.
Yeah.
They can't believe that. They're like, no, I'll just make that, you know. And obviously we're being a bit sort of facetious, but ultimately they don't understand that process, and they certainly don't understand scheduling.
Why do we need an hour of television or a half hour of television? That world is being eroded rapidly in a good way. And, you know, particularly here where, you know, a television hour is crafted around 5 advertising breaks selling dog food and tampons and furniture cleaner or whatever it is, that makes no sense at all. This is a great, creative, brave new world. Everyone is trying to figure out how to make money off it, and a few people will.
Yeah, I think there's room for both in the world. You know, when you talk about scheduling, I made a show for BBC Three last year, and what I love about that channel, it's not on linear. It's not even on what we sort of call traditional television. It's online only. And when we were talking about the documentary and how long it was going to be, BBC Three were like, "Well, make it as long as it needs to be. It could be 44 minutes, it could be 60 minutes, it could be 30 minutes. You know, that it's just make the best one." And it was a brilliant, freeing experience, and you realize how much of your life is spent trying to crowbar either footage into something to make it last an hour, or be sad that you're taking stuff out because you're trying to make it last for 40 minutes or whatever. It's a generally great editorial situation to be in when you don't have those constraints.
All fascinating stuff. And I've almost lost track of the fact that we're still waiting for Phil's Get in the Bin. So come on, Phil, who or what are you going to chuck in the bin?
What I'm throwing in the bin is related to my hero of the week. I'm throwing in the bin the British natural history TV industry as a whole.
Wow.
It's a big thing to throw in the bin.
That's huge.
Because I think
it's a big bin. You're going to need a bigger bin.
We'll have a dumpster. This week it's a skip.
Yeah.
Showing my American, 2 decades in American here, saying dumpster. Yeah, as much as Daniel, with his brilliant little video, was able to highlight an issue, what got me thinking about this was the fact that there's a company called Silverback Productions that's run by 2 former heads of the Natural History Unit who were recently hauled over the coals by the Daily Mail. Now, let's throw in the caveat of this was in the Daily Mail, so it may not be entirely accurate. But for essentially using beautiful content that they had created, exquisite images of natural history, to help sell plastic bottled water in China. I don't know the ins and outs of that exactly. But if it's true, it's not only a bad look, it's really thoughtless and kind of stupid. And what concerns me, and I am not alone in this, you only have to talk to George Monbiot, who's been banging this drum for a long time, is that natural history television has done a massive disservice over the decades for animals, the environment, and many, many conservation issues by literally framing them out and presenting a view of the world that is exquisite it's beautiful, but doesn't show any of the real problems and doesn't try to tackle any of the real issues. And things are changing ever so slightly in a kind of comfortable way, but it's been a massive disservice, I think, to conservation, which we are all now reaping the harvest of. And so I think it's time for certain people in positions of real influence in this business to think differently. I don't have all the answers myself. I always try to tell great stories and tackle issues using the dark and evil powers of television for good. But that's my sin dumpster for the week.
It's a really fascinating viewpoint. I'd welcome our audience to, feedback any thoughts that they've got as well. And maybe we can revisit this very point. And we've never really done a natural history special. So there's so many fascinating talking points on that particular genre that we'll get to go through. Yeah, we'll do a natural history special, and maybe these are some of the issues that we'll discuss on that. Fascinating stuff. So Phil, Ian, thank you so much for coming on your show. You've been amazing guests. I hope to see you out there in real life before we lock down again coming into winter. I hope we see you very, very soon.
You have to get me back on in 6 months to see who made it out of my purgatory.
I'm hoping you're going to be keeping notes, and let's do that.
I will. It's like Father Christmas. I know who's been naughty and nice. Thank you for having me, Justin. And it was lovely to meet you, Phil.
Don't forget that 5% commission.
Was it 4%? Did we say 3%?
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Justin.
Speak to you again soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
And it's that time of the show where we get to go over to Hollywood to speak to Peter White from Deadline. Peter, how are you doing? Great to see you again.
Hey, Justin. I'm good, man. You?
Yeah, very good. Very good. It's been Emmys week. You must have been pretty busy.
It has. I just had to put the top half of the suit on this year because we went virtual. But yeah, it didn't really slow us down in terms of what we were working on. But really, only my second Emmys. I did last year over here in person, and then this year's all gone digital. So no, it was interesting. Last year was the British invasion. This year seems like it's the Canadian invasion. It was obviously a big night for Schitt's Creek, which took the comedy sweep, I guess, in a really weird year. We can go into some of that, but that was the show that really got all the headlines this year. I think it was expected to do quite well. It was its last year. It's quite a well-liked show, particularly by critics. So the TV Academy voters sort of similarly enjoyed it, but I don't think anybody expected it to do this well. A total of 9 awards. That's including the technical categories. Pretty good for ITV as well, which I don't think too many people would expect, given that their distribution arm sells it globally. So that was great for them. What else? It wasn't much of a night for the Brits, certainly compared to last year. Jesse Armstrong's Succession did 7 awards. They won the main drama award as well. Jeremy Strong. You had John Oliver last week tonight. He won his 5th straight award with that Avalon show. So he's doing well. But in terms of other things, the really interesting thing from a US perspective was the fact that Netflix was sort of expected to do really well this year. If you looked at the nominations, it got 160 nominations compared to HBO's 107. But on the night, it was HBO's. It was a real bit of a shutout for Netflix. The only 2 main awards that they won were Julia Garner winning for Best Supporting Actress for Ozark and a directing award for Unorthodox. So, those 2 compared to HBO's 11, Watchmen was the big show for HBO on the night, as well as Succession and a few other things. But yeah, not great news for Netflix. They're going to have to sort of pick themselves up and try again next year. For the other streamers, we've been talking about the streaming revolution, but in terms of awards, Apple TV only won 1. They got Billy Crudup for the morning show. Disney Plus, Amazon, they didn't get anything on the main night. Hulu sort of technically won something for Mrs. America, but it's sort of essentially an FX show. The awards are still going to linear networks, it seems.
All right, yeah, the linear networks fighting back.
Yeah, I mean, I think HBO, HBO is an awards darling, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. But Netflix will be disappointed that it wasn't able to turn those, as many of those nominations into the big awards. There's the Creative Arts Emmys, which is essentially the sort of technical and second tier awards, which don't get shown. They go this year. They did them all through the week. So they picked up lots of numbers. There's volume, I guess, which is sort of similar to their content strategy, but not many for the big Sunday night. I guess this year maybe they won't be so disappointed as they wouldn't have been able to sort of get up there on stage and do it. This year was all done virtually. I really enjoyed the show, actually. In terms of that, I think Jimmy Kimmel did a really good job holding it all together. There were no real technical mishaps. I think we were expecting a few bloopers, but there wasn't. You get to see inside of people's homes or where they were celebrating. The Schitt's Creek gang had hired out this big Gothic mansion in Toronto. You had Zendaya who won for Euphoria. Had, this incredible celebration with her family and friends. So it was interesting to watch. I mean, it was weird that it was all wrapped up by 9 o'clock and no parties to go to. Everybody
in bed by 9:30.
Pretty much.
That's not an awards ceremony, is it?
Well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, look, my job is defined by going out shoe leather gossip, and that often relies on a drink in hand after midnight with loose lips at these things. So
yeah, absolutely.
A bit weird that not that much came out of it, but yeah. It was expected. Over the last few months, it was sort of undeniable as to whether it might happen. But given the situation, I think they did a fantastic job.
Yeah, and did I see that Schitt's Creek was being celebrated in Canada by the CN Tower being lit up gold? I think I saw something about that somewhere. That was,
I didn't spot that. I mean, it's rare that the Prime Minister of a country, in this case Justin Trudeau, congratulated the show for a historic night, which certainly shows you the success of that show, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because that show's got a really interesting story. It was a really small Canadian show. Certainly Eugene Levy is well known, and Catherine O'Hara, but to all intents and purposes, it was a small Canadian comedy. It wasn't really, and it was on Pop TV in the States, and God bless them, they don't really do that anymore. They certainly don't do original programming. But Netflix might feel a little bit bitter that essentially the reason that show has done so well is that the reruns or the second window rights, whatever you want to call them, air on Netflix, and they're not really part of that story. But that's probably why the show has done so well, and probably why it's won so many awards.
Anything for Michael Douglas?
No, not only did Michael Douglas not win anything, he was one of a handful of people who refused to even have a camera set up on the night. So there were sort of rumours that he was in Europe and didn't fancy getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning. But no, my old friend Mickey Douglas wasn't available.
Right. Okay. Well, hopefully it's not reflecting on you in any way with the Douglas family. Let's hope this isn't going to be a recurring thing with who you interview next year.
Well, I hope not. No one wants a curse. But no, they've got one more season of the Kaminsky method, so Michael might win for next year.
Let's keep our fingers crossed for him. Great to see that some of the awards events and the big landmark events in the TV calendar are still going. So thanks for running us through that. Brilliant to speak to you as ever, and hopefully we'll be speaking to you very soon.
Yeah, absolutely, Justin. I'll speak to you again.
And it's that time in the week where we get to speak to Girts Licis from K7 Media. You're back from your travels, Girts.
Yes, hi, Justin.
This week we're talking about IP.
Yes, that's right. Well, first of all, I think when we are talking about different genres, we are seeing less and less of strictly something, like strictly scripted or strictly non-scripted shows. What I mean by that is that borders have been constantly melting between the two genres in recent years, and they have increasingly borrowed from each other probably the best and used the synergies in tone, in structure, and production tools. And we see more and more, for instance, true events used as a premise or just inspiration for scripted drama, feeling authentic and with a specific location becoming a character on its own right, something that's pretty factual and unscripted by definition. While unscripted shows are increasingly adapting to binge viewing, adding the drama feel, from a soap opera like The Bachelor, for instance, to a thriller like Hunted. So it's all about good story and storytelling. And now when it comes to finding the right story for a show, some time ago it was quite easy. Either it's an adaptation, meaning the script based on a book, most commonly a novel, or an original script. Commercially, adapted scripts are generally performing slightly better and carry a little less risk finding their audience, since they have a distinct advantage from the start, as many viewers already recognize a certain IP. According to Forbes, film adaptations of books earn 53% more at the worldwide box office. And British Royal Television Society has also dropped an info that more than a half of new SVOD scripted series already in 2017 were based on books. And same Forbes has stated that book-based TV dramas across 4 major UK TV networks sees audience shares even 50% larger than original scripts. What is changing, though, and what we are seeing more and more across many markets, in a similar way like there is this mantra that a good content can come from anywhere, is that a good story can come from anywhere too, not just books. And recently we see series emerging from podcasts, from video games, magazine articles, YouTube posts, paintings, and God knows what else. I think this trend correlates very well with the way streamers make their decisions when greenlighting new original projects, as one of the main criteria for a new show for them is what new audience this particular show could bring to the service. So, for instance, when it comes to podcasts, it's generally a youthful audience armed with disposable income and described as loyal, affluent, and educated. Video gamers are probably even younger, competitive, and someone you could expect to get addicted to binging easily in a similar way they can not turn away from their game screens. Another reason for turning to podcasts in particular is look out for that next big story which can cut through the noise of the already pretty crowded scene and grip the audiences, is that many podcasts have a key feature which makes them even more suitable for TV adaptation than a good book sometimes. They have an episodic structure built around cliffhangers. Speaking of genres, probably only sky is the limit. First that comes to my mind, though, is true crime, since it is a particularly popular podcast genre and still very popular on TV, obviously, both scripted and unscripted, so there is a lot of crossover. A notable example is Bravo's Dirty John, a dramatized take on the abuse wrought on Deborah Newell and her family by master manipulator Dirty John Meehan, detailed in the podcast of the same name. Meanwhile, Jamie Dornan, Alec Baldwin, and Christian Slater are leading the cast of Dr. Death, a podcast turning into a series for Peacock, telling the story of Dr. Christopher Dunch. And just recently, SBS All Access, which we are going to relate to as Paramount Plus going forward, announced they are developing a drama based on the Happy Face podcast, inspired by the true story of Melissa Moore, who discovered at age 15 that her father was a prolific serial killer known as Happy Face. As an adult, then, Melissa changed her name, guarded her secret, and cut off all ties to her father, who is currently serving life in prison. But when he contacts her to take credit for more victims, she is pulled into an extraordinary investigation into her father's crimes, the impact they had on his victims' families, and the reckoning with her own identity. We have also seen broadcasters pick up on the buzz around certain podcast-featured cases and take their own looks at them, not necessarily tied to the series that ignited the interest initially. For example, Brazil's SVOD platform Globoplay is looking to explore the Vandro case, a true crime case from the 90s revolving around the disappearance of a 6-year-old boy who was found days later, dismembered, having been killed as part of a satanic ritual. The case previously was the focus of a podcast, which went on to become the most downloaded audio documentary in the country. Fictional narrative-driven podcasts have also been picking up interest from the scripted TV world, such as Julia Roberts' starring adaptation of psychological thriller podcast Homecoming on Amazon, or Limetown on Facebook Watch, following an investigative journalist played by Jessica Biel, rooting into the truth behind a shady neuroscience research facility in Tennessee. And another fertile area for adaptations from podcasts seem to be anthologies. One recent example being Committed, an anthology series in development for ABC that explores modern life through the lens of contemporary marriage in America.
So podcasts are obviously proving fertile ground for TV adaptations.
Yeah, maybe ours will become one too one day. Who knows?
Well, there we are. Yeah, that's a great idea. TellyCast, the TV series. So what else? What other than podcasts are providing fertile ground?
Well, like I mentioned, there are other mediums, other IP as well. Quite popular. Speaking of video game, for instance, video game franchises, just to name a few. Resident Evil was the highest grossing video game movie franchise of all time, with more than $1.2 billion in worldwide earnings. And it is reported that Netflix is now working on a Resident Evil series too. Let's not forget that another game-based series, The Witcher, not that long already enjoyed one of the best debuts of any Netflix series to date. Sony is working on a new live-action series based on Final Fantasy XIV, a massively multiplayer online role-playing game that first launched in 2013. Showtime also expects a 10-episode series Halo based on the Halo video game franchise. So the success of video game adaptations often lies in the way that these projects are approached. Many game adaptations have failed when trying to recreate the stories for a different medium. Usually in those cases when the story is written specifically for the screen rather than the gamepad, the result has been better. And this is also the route chosen by creators of Fallout, a post-apocalyptic series set in the aftermath of a nuclear war in 2077, currently in works for Amazon Prime. As you asked about other mediums, one interesting example is a painting as inspiration. This spring saw the premiere of sci-fi anthology series Tales from the Loop on Amazon. The series is, like I mentioned, inspired by hyper-real paintings by a Swedish artist named Simon Stollenhag. These series are telling 8 and interlinking stories from a snowy town, which, due to being built over a machine called the Loop, is home to a number of bizarre sci-fi-esque events. The show's calm, kind of meditative, slow TV-like tone seemed arriving quite well on time these days, with viewers looking to ways to escape the current realities. And then we are also seeing increase in stories developed into film works, for instance, from magazine articles. Condé Nast, the publisher of such magazine titles as The New Yorker, Vogue, Vanity Fair, Wired, and GQ, is unsurprisingly one of the media houses leading this way. And among numerous projected article-based movies, there is also a series in making called the Untitled Backpage.com project, which is going to be based on the 2019 Wired article about Backpage.com's battle with the US government and how its fate could shape the future of Silicon Valley. So, yeah, there are lots of things to talk about, and maybe to round up for today, I shall mention also HBO Max, which has announced a series inspired by a Twitter account. And these series are called One Perfect Shot, same as the account name. These will be half-hour docuseries, which will celebrate iconic movie moments guided by Hollywood's most exhilarating cinematic voices.
IP, essentially brands and franchises that have been developed in video games, in paintings, and even digital social media accounts really starting to come through. So it's not just about books. And obviously there's a huge thirst for this type of original content, especially when it's got a baked-in audience that it can bring to a subscription service or a TV channel.
Yes, exactly. It broadens the possibilities to find these niche audiences, which exactly specific platforms are looking for.
It's interesting, the video game side of things. Obviously, huge industry, bigger than film, built on franchises. Certainly when it comes to movies, they've had a really mixed history, I think, with some of these big franchises. And Halo being one of the biggest, as it's extraordinary. I mean, it's got a history when it comes to development of that for the big screen, and it's never really come through. So it'd be really exciting to see a really strong Halo TV series in the works. That's exciting to hear about that.
And also speaking of power of franchises, in the recent, I think, announcing the second quarter results, the Netflix leaders mentioned that that's also one area they are looking into, that they are kind of missing. One thing they feel they are still missing is their own Star Wars or their own Jumanji or their own Harry Potter. So there is definitely lots to talk about in the future and lots of work to do.
Interesting. So we won't see you next week. We'll be joined by another one of your colleagues, and we're going to be talking about South Korea. Thank you, Girts. We'll speak to you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's all, folks, for this week's show. Thanks for listening, as always. Please remember to rate and subscribe to the show and share it with friends and colleagues. If you want to hear more about our advertising and sponsorship packages for MIPCOM Online Plus, please email justin@boomdialogue.com. That's justin@boomdialogue.com. TellyCast was edited by Ian Chambers. Next week, we're unravelling the secrets of South Korea's massively successful content market with Diane Min, Head of Format Sales for CJENM, and Claire Thompson, Non-Executive Director of K7 Media. Until then, as always, stay safe.